How is digital streaming impacting media consumption? That's the topic of today's edition of Inside AB. I'm Jeremy Lawrence and this is Eddie Taylor. Eddie, before we get into a poll that's being conducted with how users are consuming content, first let's talk about the big new players who are utilising streaming.
Yeah, and I'm sure most people are familiar with the guys here that we've listed here, but the subscription model for consuming TV and films and music is really dominated by these guys. Netflix, they've just had a bumper year, bumper profits, 110 million subscribers around the world now. That's insane amount of traffic that they're getting. Amazon Prime is one of the more recent entrants into this market. They've made big strides, 90 million users they've now got. And in Spotify, I mean, that's been the big success and the big story of the music entertainment industry. They're the single biggest music entertainment industry sector company now, $8.4 billion it's now worth, bigger than bigger than the whole combined space in the US. It's really a massive inroads these guys have made into traditional kind of media consumption habits.
Okay, so that's the context for where digital streaming is at. There's been a new poll conducted by YouGov about users in Saudi Arabia and the UAE.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was over 2,000 people that were asked to participate in this survey, and it's in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, two of the biggest media spaces certainly in this part of the world. They basically asking them what their attitudes was to streaming, how they were consuming content in terms of traditional versus new. And people sort of tend to think that we're in a region that's maybe sort of 5 years behind the US or Western Europe, but we're not. These changes are happening here, and they're happening quite quickly.
You mean people like to be on their phones?
They do. It has been noticed that people they like their phones here. Yeah. So
let's get into the different sectors. Music.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Sort of 29% of consumers in Saudi Arabia, and that's even higher in the UAE, it's 34%, 35%, I think, have increased their use of online streaming services to access music in the last 12 months. Right. So that's a third in just 12 months. That's a really, really, really big, significant jump, and 34% are subscribed to music streaming services. So that's a really kind of a substantial shift away from more traditional ways of consuming and listening to music. But there are some sort of devils in the details, if you like, with these numbers. There are 35% in the UAE listen to streaming more in the last 12 months, but interestingly, 24% listen to streaming less. So there's actually been a fall off amongst nearly a quarter of the people that responded to this survey.
So they're trying it, but not everybody's adopting it.
It's not sticky yet. And I think that means is that, people are still in a phase of discovery. They're still trying out what the services are, and they're comparing it to their traditional media habits. And what is also interesting is that when a streaming service loses a customer in this region, they almost never get them back. And that's a really, really interesting dynamic now. So if anybody's going to offer a new streaming service or even traditional radio, there is still an audience to capture here.
Okay. Well, sticking with music, tell us about radio. What are the habits now?
Yeah, I mean, radio has sort of traditionally been a bit immune to the digital encroachment onto their space, unlike TV. It's still people still in their cars, people still listen to music on their radio in traditional devices, but we're starting to see those changes now enter the market now. And last year, fully a third of consumers and 28% of consumers in the UAE listen to radio less, and that's got to be a worry.
Okay. Video.
Yeah. Again, we're talking about similar numbers. It's 30%. It's a third of all consumers are doing this more and more and more every year. They are now consuming TVs and films on their devices, whether it's tablets, whether it's laptops, whether it's their phones. And, that's, again, it's moving away from the traditional broadcast TV networks, your OSNs, your NBCs. Again, now it's about delivering content to where people want to watch it, and it's, how they want to watch it.
There were some interesting stats, I believe, though, when it came to television.
I mean, what is also interesting is that what we're seeing now is that people are accessing things that they don't have to pay for. And I think that's the big sort of elephant in the room of the whole broadcast piece now. So it isn't necessarily whether you pay for a subscription model versus a sort of a home bundle package via Etisalat or Do. It's they're using streaming services to bypass those payment mechanisms. 29% watch content on platforms and sites that don't require payment. That's a big challenge for TV companies.
Yeah, so it's a very new industry, and it all seems like the future, but that's the threat of piracy is a very big factor.
And the companies like OSN are working with the regulatory authorities to really try and clamp down on it. And I'm sure everyone's experienced a site where they might have watched something that they perhaps didn't pay for is no longer there. 6 weeks, and that's due to a lot of effort that's gone into from the regulatory authorities here and by TV companies like OSN, who need to get people to pay for their content.
Okay, let's talk about the TV habits though. Some surprising results.
Yeah, I mean, what is actually interesting is that it hasn't necessarily been at the cost of traditional TV watching. Actually, people are watching a bit more TV than perhaps they were. I don't know whether that's to do with economic cycles, whether people have got a bit less disposable income in their back pockets at the moment and therefore are choosing to stay at home. It may be because there's just a heck of a lot of really good TV on at the moment, whether that's, blockbuster series like Game of Thrones or
good TV sets at good prices as well now.
Yeah, it's a genuine kind of part of the entertainment mix now. I mean, you could actually argue that TV is encroaching into movie space. A lot of big name directors and producers and actors are moving into series and moving into the HBOs and the Netflix of this world. So TV as an entertainment choice is actually experiencing a boom time, really.
Okay, so a lot of different factors that are more than meets the eye. So what's your conclusion of all this when we talk about digital streaming and how it's going to continue to evolve? What came out of this YouGov survey that tells us about our habits in this region?
Well, streaming's definitely here. It's definitely something that has to be factored in. It means that radio broadcasters and TV broadcasters have to be nimble and receptive to that. It means that mobile carriers have to sort of up their game when it comes to the connectivity to make sure that the experience is seamless. But I think the overall lesson is people want good content, and I think now in a kind of a multi kind of platform environment, they don't really care where they get it. If it comes from OSN, great. If it comes from Netflix, great. If it comes from YouTube or Amazon, great. They will go where the good content is, and it's not really, they're not making a choice between media channels or platforms. They're making a choice between A content versus B content, and I think that's an important lesson.
Okay, great. Well, that's where digital streaming is going, according to a new survey by YouGov. A lot of big changes ahead, and it seems like in this region we're right on the cusp of it. So you've been watching Inside AB. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join us every weekday at 10 a.m. Thanks, Eddie Taylor.
No problem.